My grandfather was a painter and decorator his whole life, as far as I'm aware, and he built a fairly successful business. I suppose the job is fairly self-explanatory, really. You have to make sure that the interior of a house looks nice and meets the client's specifications. So in order to do that, he would do things like take measurements, order materials, and organize putting them up or into people's homes. That could include putting up wallpaper as well as applying paint to surfaces. I'm fairly sure he did it for pretty much his entire life, from the 1930s to the 1970s when he died. Towards the end, he was rather ill, and my grandmother ran much of the business. But he never retired, I think, so it's safe to say he lived and died a painter and decorator. When it comes to what I think about this job, I actually rather wish I had someone like that in my life right now to help me finish some work on the house. So from my perspective, it's invaluable. I suppose it must have been a lot of hard work, too, now that I think about it. It's a lot to organize and calculate all by yourself. I know I'd have struggled to do it. I suppose that was why he was something of a pillar of the community back in those days, since he had a lot on his plate. It's a good thing he did do that job, because if he hadn't, I'd have had nothing to talk about. All my other grandparents didn't really have jobs or workplaces, in the traditional sense, at least.
What jobs are hard to do?
Well, that could be almost any job if you don't understand what you need to do. I suppose the most difficult would be those requiring some sort of specialist knowledge or training, like being a scuba diving instructor or a data analyst. Those require years of training to master, and I suppose at least some sort of coursework to help you grasp the basics.
Who should be paid more?
Well, I imagine everybody thinks they should be paid more, but ideally the people who are paid the least, even though they do a great deal of work. So people like classroom assistants or manual laborers, I don't think they get a lot relative to other people, and I don't think they're particularly easy professions either. So why they're so poorly paid escapes me.
And what's the difference between payment for mental work and that for physical work?
Well, on the surface of it, it seems like the wages for mental labor are higher. And of course, by contrast, manual labor would not be rewarded as much. But I don't think that's actually true when you think about it, to be honest, because in my country, for example, people that have a trade, like a plumber or a joiner, make a lot more money or the equivalent amount as a teacher, provided they're suitably skilled. So I don't think there's actually a difference, to be honest. I know the question is about what the difference is, but I don't think it exists.
And do you think that physical workers can receive higher salaries in the future?
Well, that's a very good question. If the progression in robotics technology is not as fast as we would like it to be, then they will probably be paid more because human beings will be more capable of doing things than machines. So the fine motor skills that we have are extremely difficult to replicate in machines at the moment. However, if we have some sort of scientific breakthrough that allows this to happen and machines become more dexterous, then I don't think they will. I think they'll be paid a lot less because their labor will no longer be required. So they will need to have some other skill to fall back on.
How important is giving training to employees?
Well, that will probably depend on the sector of the economy they work in and what they need to do for their job. So if it's something like just picking fruit, then I can't imagine the training requirements are too strenuous. But if it's organizing the entire crop harvest, that probably takes a great deal of skill and training, or a great deal more than just picking the stuff up.
Is salary the most important factor when choosing a job?
Well, that depends on how desperate you are for money. For people in lower economically developed countries or of low socioeconomic status, then I can certainly see it being a priority. But that's not the be-all and end-all. Some people already live comfortably and can do what they like, so choice might be more important. Freedom of action might play a bigger role in their decision-making.
Do you think machines could replace human workers in the future?
Well, yes, because they already do. And that trend shows no sign of reversal, short of some sort of huge environmental catastrophe, which I can't even imagine right now.
It seems like that's going to continue into the future as machines take on more and more responsibilities because they're more capable and they don't require things like workers' rights or a union to protect them, which requires union dues. So why would you pay for those things if you don't have to from the perspective of a company?
And how have robots and computers changed the way people work?
Well, in some ways, they've made life easier because, for example, rather than having a whole department to animate a film, you now get one computer to do it or one person with a computer to organize that. And so from a logistical and organizational perspective, then it's become much easier. But of course, that's from the company's perspective. From the perspective of the workers, it's made life more difficult because they now have to get jobs that are different from the ones they prepared for, or they've been put out of a job by these changes in technology or these developments in technology.